Hey everyone.
Hello, party people. Back again for some React fun. Yeah. With Bob Ziroll.
Woohoo!
Hi. Glad to join.
Happy to have you here, Bob. Thanks for joining us. Now, we've been doing these coding things for a while, haven't we? I reckon more than a year. People have always said...
Wow, really?
Yeah. People have often said, wouldn't it be easier to do this with React? And we've been like...
Maybe.
It might be. But we haven't used React for a while, have we?
No, I don't think so.
I certainly haven't anyway. So that's why we've avoided it. But the day has come where we are going to use React. This is? Yes, I'm excited, Bob, especially because you're here. This is going to be, I'm not sure if you can call it a refactoring, because we have this link tree, which we did in another stream right here in vanilla.js. And my idea is to convert it to a React app.
Yeah, that would be quite a nice exercise to also see how easy is it to convert an existing app that you already have in like vanilla.js or something. How easy would it be to make it in React?
Yeah, totally.
Neat.
My plan is to start from the ground up, really, to give people an idea of what it's like to get started with React. And then, see what we can build in an hour. But first, a massive hello to everyone who's joined us.
Wait.
Look at them all.
Whoa.
Yes. Let us know if you're following Bob's React course on Scrimba. Here it is. Learn React for free, or maybe the advanced one, which is also with Bob. Or if you've just popped along to say hello. And we have a tradition here, which is, if you're new here, please put a bunny rabbit into the chat. If you've been before, hit me with that tiger. We don't use this information, it's just for fun. So let's get into it. But before we start coding, could you tell us, Bob, what are the benefits of using React?
Yeah, so for a small app like this, it may not be easier to do in React because there's a bit of setup that's involved. But as soon as it became more complex or you wanted to add additional pages, suddenly it becomes difficult to do things just in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Or at least, I shouldn't say difficult, but it takes a lot more of your own maintenance as the developer. So React can help remove some of that complication and be a lot more declarative instead of imperative.
Yeah. So what does that actually mean?
So the way I always think of it, and I think I teach this in the course, is declarative or imperative is like if you were to go to a restaurant and you were to say to the host, I want you to walk us down this aisle 15 steps and then turn left and walk down that hallway 30 more steps and then turn right and then introduce us to the table that's there. As opposed to, so telling them step by step, or in this case, telling the computer step by step exactly how to do its job. Whereas declarative means you have a host who's trained to do what they're supposed to do, their job, and you can just say, I need a table for 2, and then rely on them to do all of the necessary steps. So as you have discovered, I'm sure the more JavaScript you've written, you have to like go get the element from the DOM and then tell it to update in this very specific way, and then update something else, and then update that first DOM node in a very specific way. And maybe wrap it in a function so you don't have to write that over and over. Whereas with React, you can just, the way that it's set up is like, I'm just going to let React handle those minute details and updating the DOM. And I just get to write kind of what looks like HTML and JavaScript, and it will do all of that work behind the scenes.
Sounds pretty good. Yeah, I definitely know what you mean about having to spell out every single tiny exhausting step with JS. So yeah, take some of that out, and that sounds great. So let's get started with how you can get started with React. I will head on over to Scrimba. Here we are. If you're on Scrimba, you can just click New Scrim.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a React one right here.
If you want to show that again, I don't know if it did it for the live stream, but it was like just loading the whole time you were doing that.
Oh, really?
Oh.
It might only be me, but
it might be. So you go in here. Well, let's start from the beginning. Scrimba, new Scrim. And then we have, no, not JavaScript, React. Woo. There we
Yay.
go. One,
Oh, yeah.
React. But if you're not in Scrimba, there's various ways of adding it. One of them, which I think is what you might call the quick and dirty way, is adding it via the CDNs, which I only found out recently you can do. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's good for just a quick prototype.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not able or willing to use Scrimba, which will just have it set up, or something like Code Sandbox, which I think you can just tell it like, hey, I want this to be React, and it will set it up for you. You can just like plop the CDNs into your VS Code and make that change to your script tag, and it'll work.
Yeah, like on here. So presumably these are on the React website, or you can find them within the first part of Bob's React course. So what's not good about doing that then, Bob?
Honestly, I don't know. It gives you a warning that's like, this is not the right way to do it. I suspect it's because it does bundling in your browser instead of doing it ahead of time. So it's probably slow. If you were to like send the entire React app to the client and then let the client try to bundle everything or unpackage everything. But I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. And then if you found yourself in a Scrim that didn't have React already there, you can just add them in the modules, can't you?
Yes.
Yes. So you add React and React DOM. Demo. Add. I might spell this wrong. Is that the right one, Bob? React hyphen.
Yeah,
that's it.
And now you have a React Scrim. But what about locally? How do people get started locally?
The old recommendation was to use Create React App. You would just, I think it's npx in your terminal. You would, cd to the location on your computer where you want the React app to live. You would do npx create-react-app and then the name of your app. The recommended way now is to use Vite. Well, I recommend using Vite because it is Vite. It is fast, much faster than using Create React App. And it's just as simple, if not simpler.
So I've heard about this, but I don't really know what it is.
No, I can finally know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
It's French for fast.
I was like, Vite. That is a very strange name for a bundler, or what it is.
So what does this actually do?
Yeah, it's a tool that will help spin up your front end system. So it's not just for React; it's for Vue, Svelte. I think if you ran the code, it asks you like in an interactive thing in the terminal, like which library are you using, and then you tell it React, for example, and then it'll ask, do you want React with JavaScript or React with TypeScript, and you can choose which one you want. And then it just kind of does everything for you. But it uses ES-Build under the hood, which is very, very fast. And that makes it super fast. And then when you're building for production, it uses rollup, and that's not quite as fast, but the developer experience is just a significant. I mean, if you spin up a React app with Create React App, it could take you anywhere from 20 to 120 seconds to get it all installed and everything. And Vite will do it in a matter of milliseconds or a few seconds, maybe. It's pretty incredible.
I see. So you basically say npm create Vite latest, or you can then pick. So something like npm create vite latest name of your app, and then you say template, and one of the templates is React, or if you want TypeScript, you can say react.js.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of others one. Yeah, cool. Okay.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
neat.
highly recommend
Okay.
Vite. It's really good.
Cool. So back to our app, which we're going to be building, well, rebuilding. Well, let's do it here. They're not here.
Yeah, I think it was in that Untitled Scrim. Yeah, because that looks like Scrimba's JavaScript, sorry, React template.
It does.
Yeah, and the React template is a little outdated. I actually just submitted a proposal for an update for Scrimba when we create a new React app that it will use this one that I proposed, hopefully. But the fact that it's using a class component kind of rubs me the wrong way. And then you'll notice it's still using React 16. So while we're at it, I would probably go ahead and update those dependencies. Just right click and update, and or upgrade, and that'll send you to version 18.2.
Nice.
And then if you hit refresh, I bet it'll give you a warning. Or you hit save, yeah.
Warning, React DOM render is no longer supported in React 18. So React DOM render is what's on line 12. It's now been replaced with something else, which I can't remember the name of. Component render or something?
Create root, yeah. So I would just, if you really want to start from scratch, I would just get rid of everything after line 2, and we'll just start from there.
Oops. Yeah.
Cool. So what we currently have then is 2 lines, which are importing React from React and importing React DOM from React DOM. One of these, you'll have to remind me which one you don't actually need anymore, I think.
Yeah, it's import React from React. I think in Scrimba you will need to keep that.
Okay.
But and I haven't tested it with Vite. I know with Create React App using Webpack you can get rid of it, but after React 17 or React 17 and on. But I haven't gotten it to work in Scrimba. I think it has to do with the kind of bundler that's being used, and I'm not sure about Vite either. I think Vite doesn't let you do it either.
Okay.
Interesting.
I would just leave it in there because it's not that hard to type.
Yeah, but in general, if you see a code base that doesn't have it in, that it's still working, that's why. Good to know. Yes, so let's get around to, I guess, rendering our first thing, which, going back to our Linktree clone, what do we actually have in here? Oh yeah, I decided I would use a load of...
Flexbox.
This Tailwind?
Yeah.
Or just utility classes.
It's my own personal Tailwind, yeah. Decided to build some utility classes in there, which is, one way of doing it. But basically, we need a div, fairly straightforward, and then
well, let's just
anchors
render
inside the div. So yeah, let's start with rendering one called tree, a div.
Yeah, so we don't need that. Okay.
That's us.
Okay, that's us. Okay, cool.
Right.
So how do we do that, Bob?
Yeah, so with React 18, that warning will tell you that React DOM.render isn't supported anymore. And so you use create root. Things have changed a little bit. It's pretty minor what you actually have to change. First thing to do is on line 2, you'll change React DOM to, or in the quotation marks, the package name, you'll change it to react-dom/client. And the Scrimba team was hard at work at making sure that something that seems so trivial would actually work in Scrimba. It took like a week to figure it out how to import from a subdirectory, but they got it. So it should be working. And then what you do is you'll create a new root element. Like you'll go grab the root element. So you can say something like const root element equals React DOM dot create root. Actually, you could just call it constant root, I think, because it's not a DOM element.
Yeah, fair enough.
Create root. And then that's where you'll go and select your div with the ID of root. So document.getElementById by ID root or query selector, whatever you want.
Let's do an ID.
So
Yeah, and then probably in the HTML we need to save a div with the ID of root, unless there's one already there.
It should already be there.
yeah, I just copied it from the div ID root.
Good.
Okay, like that.
Okay. Yep. And then and now you have a root that you can render to. So you'll say root.render, because the create root will return an object that has a render method that you can use. And that's where you'll put some JSX. So you'll essentially look like you're typing HTML right inside your JavaScript. And that can freak people out at the beginning, but you'll get very used to it. So I would do like an H1 with Hello World or something. And so
if you're finding the image or the video of us blurry, it seems okay on my end. So try giving it a refresh, and hopefully that will clear things up, and you'll see us in beautiful 1080p.
Whoa, there we are.
Whoa, look at that.
There it is. First React app.
Yeah. So
now
we have
this. Get lots of users.
Yeah, totally. It looks like HTML, but it's not. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so when we were just talking about how in some systems you have to say import React from React, I mean, notice that you're using React DOM, right? You're importing React DOM and then you're using it as React DOM.createRoot, but nowhere in this code does it look like you're using React. But go ahead and comment out import React from React and hit refresh.
Yeah.
React's not defined. You're like, well, I'm not using React. Why do I care about that? And that's because inside of the React library, when you're importing React, it is defining like that less than symbol, that greater than symbol, and telling it what that means in JavaScript, because that normally makes almost no sense in JavaScript unless you're doing math, right? Something is less than another thing. And so importing React makes it so that JSX makes sense in the context of your file. And then you get to write what looks like HTML right inside your JavaScript. And that's what makes it declarative. You're not saying document.getElementById root.append child or like .create element, and document.createElement h1 or that h1 text content equals hello from Scrimba, and then appending that DOM node to the element with the ID of root. You don't have to do any of that. You just tell Scrimba, you just tell React, here's an H1, please put it in the DOM. And it'll just do that.
It's a lot easier, that's for sure. Yes.
So if I want to go and then create more stuff, so for example, I would have in the vanilla.js, HTML.js project that we had, I had a body. So what you're saying is if I'm creating a React app, then I don't really care about the body or the script. I just kind of care what I'm putting inside of this one div. So it's kind of like what we've just done is just creating an H1 here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening under the hood. It is just inserting that element into the div with the ID of root. And then everything from that point just becomes a nested child, just like in HTML, of whatever you say root.render. So usually you won't render your entire markup here in your index.js file. You'll say like render an app component, and then the app component will render like your header, your main content, and your footer. And then your main content is another component that's nested inside, and it will just kind of snowball from there and become a whole.
So what I can do is something like const app. Is it just a function with a markup? I don't remember now.
Yeah, you can just do an arrow function. You can use a function declaration. Doesn't really matter. And then you would just return your JSX from this function.
Oh, cool.
So, oh, I see. So I can either do the curlies with return.
Yeah. Oh, yep. Yeah, that's one of the benefits of using an arrow function is you can take advantage of the implicit return. So if you don't have anything to do in this function other than to return some element, you can like get rid of your curly braces and your H1 needs the slash before the H1 on the closing one. You can either use your curly braces and say return, or you can just surround it in parentheses and it's just a little bit quicker. Or don't even surround it with parentheses. Just put the H1 on the same line as the function if it's really something this simple.
Like that.
Yep. So
Cool.
Since it's on the same line, you could get rid of your parentheses, although honestly, that's not very common to make a component that just has one line in it.
All right. Okay. So in that case, let's go and try some cloning.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think our app, is that just going to be the div with a class of container? And then what I imagine is we're going to have separate components to add the links. Does that make sense?
So I suppose how do you migrate styling in this case? Like in our previous project, we had div. So in our React app, this div is now a root, but do I just still style it through CSS? So do I just go and write my CSS classes here, or is there some other way of doing it?
You can, and it would work, but I wouldn't recommend it because then you have some styling that you're doing in your index HTML and some styling that you're doing in your JavaScript, which will be most of it, because most of it will happen in JavaScript.
So basically, I now forget about my index HTML file.
Yeah, you can style your root and you can style your body. So if you wanted to say body margin 0, then just select the whole body element and do that in your CSS. But then everything else, I would style your the elements that you're rendering with your custom components.
Okay, so can I basically just copy my whole style CSS file?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, we have purple.
That makes a good start.
I can copy all of that, and you're saying that whatever I had on my body, that kind of works, but also it's probably better to do it through JS file because that's a little bit more intuitive and expected.
Yeah, it just makes it so that you aren't skipping around different types of files, trying to find where your styling is applied.
Okay.
Right, I see.
Okay, in that case, how would I recreate my styling for body and what is now a root div?
Yeah, so your container will be the root div, which is the div with the ID of root. And right now, that's just rendering an H1 with your const app. So I would build out your app component a little more so that it is rendering a div, and then you can make that div the flex container. And you might have to change your styling around if you're currently setting it to 100 view height and 100 view width and stuff like that.
So basically, if I previously had style on the body and the div, what I'm effectively doing is now I go into HTML and I try to recreate the same layout, but whatever is inside of this div without touching it. So instead of putting it on the body, I kind of create another div inside and then try to apply the same styling to recreate that.
Yeah, it is an extra step or two, which is why it's totally fine in your CSS to select the body element and to style it, because your site will never have two bodies, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can keep that there. It becomes a little tricky when you then have to remember that you have a layer, this div with the ID of root, that if it doesn't have very much stuff in it, it's still a block level element and it's only going to take up a few lines. So what I've seen people do before is they style the HTML tag, the body tag, and the hashtag root to have a height of 100 view height. I think something, or maybe it's like the HTML has 100 view height, and then the body and the div with the idea of root have 100% height. Just to basically pass the goodness of your full height thing down. But let's mess with it. Let's see what happens.
See what it does.
Yeah, let's see what happens. Okay, so in that case, let's just go for well, this needs to be div.
Yep.
So do I just
An empty one.
do I just write empty divs, or is there something?
Yep. Yeah, you can put it into a div. Another thing you can do is to use a React Fragment, which is a way to wrap your element without creating a new parent element in the DOM. So if you don't want a div there, and you just want it to like kind of melt away into the parent, then you would instead of div, you would just put an empty tag, like an empty curly or empty square angle brackets on the top and bottom.
Yeah, so you mean like that?
Yeah. It looks a little funny,
really?
but it just means that in the ultimate DOM, like you aren't creating another nested layer of a div.
Yeah.
Because the important thing with when you're rendering a component, React will not let you render two things at once. So like this, what you have right there is invalid.
That's
because
not
you're
going to
trying
work.
to render two divs in one.
Yeah, so like the common mistake I remember, it used to be that if I want to render like a list, I would create like an ordered list, and then I would just put a bunch of LIs in my returns, and then try to figure out why that doesn't work.
Yep.
Cool. So it should always return one, and kind of the common thing is just to return a fragment. Just so it's
yeah. So like, I mean, you'll hear people complain about the whole like pyramid of doom with like div inside of div inside of div inside of div. And if you're not careful with React, it will do that. So your example that you had before with two divs, each with something inside, the default way, or a lot of the tool that people will turn to, is then to wrap that whole thing in another div. And it's just creating an extra layer in the DOM that isn't really necessary. So the fragment like this is a nice tool to use.
So that's not creating a DOM element then?
Right.
Interesting. So Z530 is asking, can I nest empty angular brackets within each other?
I've never tried that. I imagine you can. I don't think it would be a problem.
Interesting.
I'm trying to
see why would you do that?
Why I would do that, because usually when you're nesting, you're trying to create a layout in CSS.
That seems to work. So there's your answer.
Well, yeah, it works.
Interesting question. Okay, let's go about making a component then, because I think it would be good to have a component to add the links.
Let's just start like this. We'll just keep it like this the whole time with all the all the fragments.
Yeah, and I just want to see.
Look at that.
I just wanted to see what does it actually.
Well, select from your mini browser. Yeah. Yep. See, it just is ID of root, and then it just has your two H1s inside. No.
Two H1s. So basically, it skips all of that instead of writing all of those different divs.
Ghost elements.
Right.
Yep.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, very nice.
So in that case, if I were to go about copying this, so you would say that I would from my old app, I would just take this whole div.
Yeah, there's some changes we'll have to make, but I would just copy that, paste it in, and then you can start refactoring to use like the benefits of React. So there's your first warning down there, and it's a good exercise to figure it out. So
invalid DOM property class. Did you mean class name? I think you probably did.
Oh, I see. Because this looks like HTML, but it's not HTML. It's JSX, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's
class is a JavaScript word.
So it's got to be.
So they can't call it class.
That's actually a common misconception.
Really?
Yeah, it's the reason you can't use, or the reason they don't use class, is because under the hood, remember this JSX, React is turning it, they're doing the imperative DOM commands like create element and so forth in order to create the elements, the DOM nodes. And when you're in JavaScript and you want to add a class name to something, you select the element and you don't say like element.class equals, you say element.class name. That's just the DOM API is to use class name. And so instead of class, use class name because that's the JavaScript that's happening under the hood.
Interesting.
Yeah, I used to teach my students at V-School that it was because class is a reserved keyword. And then I was at a meetup once and the guy was like, that's not why. It's because of class name.
Is there not a thing in React called a class as well, which is something else? Am I talking rubbish?
You can create components using JavaScript classes. That was the only way to do it for a while in the early days, but or that was, I should say, that's the primary way. But yeah, that's all I know of.
Okay,
so this is working. I would like to segue into one question here, which is, what's the easiest way to comment within JSX?
Well, in VS Code, it will kind of just do it right if you hit command /. So like if you wanted to comment out one of your anchors, in Scrimba, it will not work quite yet. I've been vying for them to fix that for a little bit.
Yeah, because it just says slashes, which is invalid. It's kind of valid in JavaScript, but it's not invalid.
Why is it adding two?
It might just put slashes into your markup. Like if you comment it out and then.
So if you want to comment out inside the JavaScript part, it works.
Yeah.
But like HTML, JSX part, it doesn't. But
well, try commenting it out and then refreshing. I think it might just put some slashes in your markup, like on your page.
Comment this and then refresh this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. How annoying. Okay, but generally, command or control
in
slash.
In HTML, this is what the comments look like.
It's doing great doing other contexts, but the easiest way to do it is to, like, if you're in VS Code, then you just hit command / and it will do what I'm about to show you. Inside of your JSX, if you want to then switch back to doing some JavaScript stuff, like writing a comment, you put a set of curly braces. So, so you put a set of curly braces there, and then you could do some JavaScript, like you could get a random number using the math module or something like that. Because the slashes will then also comment out your closing curly brace, you would need to do a multi-line comment. So you would do the /* at the beginning and then */ at the end.
So that is what.
So like /
or putting your curly brace on the next line might work just fine too.
Mr. V Gamer says it's like this.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's like that on one line, or if you're lazy like me, you can do this and annoy a lot of your other co-workers who would see the dangling curly brace, and then we get really annoyed.
Yes.
So then, so essentially, if you wanted to comment out your entire first anchor there, you could put like a curly brace above it, a curly brace below it, and then do the * / surrounding it. Yeah. I think when you do it in VS Code, it wraps every single line in the comment, which I like much more because then you can uncomment certain lines but leave certain lines uncommented. But one day we'll have it in Scrimba. Looking forward to it.
Alan Rossi says, "Hi Bob, I like your React course on Scrimba. What is your take on TypeScript?"
Yeah, I have surprisingly little experience with TypeScript, yet I am a proponent of it. Everyone I know that uses it in a production setting says it's a lifesaver, and I can see why. It's a lot of extra work and it's a lot of extra learning, like a much bigger learning curve. because you have to learn TypeScript first, and then, or like understand TypeScript, vanilla TypeScript, so to speak, and then you have to learn how to apply it in frameworks or libraries like React. And so there's a lot to learn, but it's kind of like testing, but even better than testing, I'd say, in a lot of cases, where you know that it takes extra work, but there's so many benefits on the back end that it's completely worth it.
Yes.
So my plan is, after I finish this advanced React course, hopefully by then Scrimba 2.0 with some important updates will be out, and I'll be able to start working on my TypeScript course.
Yes, all right.
And then a
Here
TypeScript
first.
and React course.
Nice.
Looking forward to that.
Mhm.
And Alana's wondering, is it common to mix Bootstrap and React together for a project?
I'd say probably 3 or 4 years ago it was. I do not see much Bootstrap out in the wild these days. But you can use Bootstrap just like you would in a vanilla project, other than using class name instead of class. But there's also a React-Bootstrap library, which makes it a little more declarative. So they actually give you components that you can import and use. So they're both cool things to look into. But honestly, I see a million times more like Tailwind or something than I see Bootstrap these days.
So that answers your question. RA, can you inject frameworks like Bootstrap and Materialize CSS into React? Yes, you can.
Yeah, Material has their own Material UI for like dedicated to React components.
Nice. Here we are. Move faster with intuitive React UI tools.
So it's like if you're looking for really well-designed, like a calendar widget or accordion, buttons, chips, checkboxes, form elements, like all that stuff is just kind of built, and you just import it and then use it according to their docs, and you like have a well-designed, well-working and functioning thing.
Oh, I like that. When you click those check boxes, it has a little animation.
Oh yeah, because Material UI is like Google's look. That's kind of what they're going for. So it's like if you want to make your app look and feel a bit like Gmail, then that's
this is the place to come.
That's the one.
Zuhair is asking, do you have a React course for beginner in Scrimba or YouTube? Yes, we do. Michael will show you now. Scrimba React. This is the one you want, Zuhair. Enjoy.
It is on YouTube, on Free Code Camp's YouTube channel. But I recommend doing it on Scrimba because then you can actually practice along with me.
Indeed.
Yes.
So let's go back to our app and then we'll return to your questions.
So normally, what I would do with HTML, with vanilla and stuff, I probably wouldn't render these anchor tags manually in the DOM, right? So if I want to create another one, what I would do is I would get like a list of links that I want to render, and I would have like an href with some text. So how would I create kind of a reusable thing for these links? So manually, I would have to go for a for loop for an array to then like inject a link and then some text.
I know this. You need to make a new file called link.js.
So how would I do that in React? Create link.js.
And then we're going to import it.
Okay. So you, let's see. I thought I saw a todos.md file. Was that in your other one?
Maybe.
Todos. Oh. Okay.
That's on the previous one.
Yeah, that's the previous todos.md.
Yeah. So like in a more real world scenario, your list would live probably somewhere off of your file system, right? Because if you want to create a new to-do item, you probably don't normally go into like a todos.js file and add a to-do. You would probably add it to a database or something.
Yes.
So what you said is perfectly fine. You can create a new JavaScript file, or if you wanted to like try and mimic what you'd get from a database, you can create a JSON file. Because JSON is what you would get over the wire.
Yeah, let's do that.
And then
JSON.
there will be links to JSON, right? So this one, link to Scrimba, and then some text. So yeah, link to JSON, why not? So probably, what is it? I would get a JSON, so I would get an array, presumably, of objects. So let's just recreate whatever I would get from.
And you don't have to surround it in a curly braces. Like your JSON is valid just to be an array.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. So, presumably, what is it? I'll have href. Let me just. Sorry, too much. So I would probably grab this href. Yeah, why not? I'll close this because I get distracted on it.
And then remember to surround your href with quotes as well. It's one of the hard things about using JSON is that it's obnoxious.
Href, and then
there's no syntax highlighting. That's strange.
Always worrying.
Yeah, it makes me think that I missed something or you missed something.
So this is not how would you normally do it anyway. This is just so you can locally, you don't have an API running and you don't really want to get involved in like writing your own Express API. So you just try to simulate it to then just do it later.
Yeah, there's varying degrees to which you can kind of fake it too. Like you could actually fetch this file. I don't know if that works in Scrimba, but you can like use the fetch API to pull it from your JSON file as if you were getting it from the web and everything. Or in this case, you can just import it, which is not as like real world, but yeah.
And then I'll just copy this text. And so yeah. Okay. Cool. So what you were saying is I would now something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think you'll need /links.json.
Of course.
Yeah.
So just to show that
so far so good.
There you go. Okay. Array of links.
Yay!
Cool. Okay. So Leanne was saying that I want to create links, link.js file. So why would I do that? What does that do?
Yeah. So like in a real world scenario, you would have some way to add to-dos to a database. Like if you're using a to-do app and you just have an interface that does that. And then maybe this app, for example, interfaces with that database to get your things to display it slightly differently. But what's nice is when you have a new to-do that you need to add to your list, you don't need to copy and paste like an anchor tag and then change the data inside, which is very imperative, right? You're saying, I want to create another DOM node and it needs to be looking exactly like this and be an anchor tag within the div inside and have these class names. If you want to add a new one,
exactly. Create HTML tag a, then a.class equals, then a.href equals.
Yeah. So in the React world, like compared to vanilla, that you'd have to do that in a vanilla way. But even inside of this JSX, it would be imperative to copy and paste the DOM nodes when you could just update the links.json file and have React automatically create every link for you.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds good.
Yes.
Yeah, it is good.
Yes. The less work, the better.
So yeah, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah.
Awesome. One thing to know about React is that because it inside of your JSX, like JSX under the hood really is just a variant of JavaScript. There are a few JavaScripty things you can do. So if you were to surround your anchors there in square brackets, like they were an array, it did it, and then put a comma after the first anchor, and then, well, try to load that. See if that works. You might need to surround your, yeah. So React will see that, oh, this is an array of React elements, and I'm just going to render them as multiple things on the page. It just knows. Oh wait, it put your. Sorry, you have to surround the bracket in curly braces. What we're doing now is not what you would do. So just so no one gets confused. So yeah, the curly braces tells it like, hey, I'm going to put a JavaScript thing here instead of JSX. And then for an array of elements, React will just automatically, and you can ignore the warning for now, but React will just automatically display them as multiple elements. It knows, hey, this is an array of elements. They probably just want all of these elements to be rendered to the screen.
So basically, so you're basically saying like, so the curly braces is just a way in the JSX to say, I'm going to write JavaScript right now.
Like we did with the comments.
Right, like we did with the comments. And then inside, we're basically saying, oh, by the way, we're now using an array, but it's just every item in the array is the whole HTML tag.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool.
So what's nice about that, obviously this is uglier than what we had, so you wouldn't do it this way. But what's nice about that is you have imported an array of data, and what you can do is change that array of data to an array of JSX elements. And so the most common way to do that is to use JavaScript's array map method. And so above your return, above line 6, below line 5, you can create an array of JSX elements by using linksdata.map.
So what I want to do is I want to say, for every entry in here, I want to map something to this.
Exactly.
So like links, I would say. So for every item in links data, I want to create like a map one-to-one inside. So here would be like a link. And what you're saying is, what I can do is I can take some JSX inside.
You have to remember to return it because you're inside of the function. So you could either do the explicit return or just change your curly braces to parentheses and take advantage of that implicit return. You need 2 parentheses at the end there. Yeah.
There we are. Lovely. Okay, so, and instead of here, basically, I can now replace
with template literals.
Yeah. Now remember, you're inside of JSX again. So because you're inside your anchor tag, what's that character you just typed? That was cool.
It's the currency in The Sims.
Oh yeah. So you'll do curly braces because link.href is a JavaScript expression.
Of course, yes.
Surround the whole thing with curly braces.
Okay, so now I'm going to do JavaScript again. Because I'm now doing JavaScript, now I can put.
And you don't need your template literals. You can just put, because link.href is a string, and so it will be already inserting a string.
Oh yeah, in the JSON it's a string.
Yes.
Other way around. There you go.
Yes, because in my JSON I have, so this is, every link is an object.
Yeah.
And I'll have a property href, that's already a string, and then a property text, that's already a string as well.
Couple of questions on this. Can you use for each too?
Yes, yeah. It doesn't matter how you how you decide you want. You could use a C style for loop if you want. Doesn't matter how you turn the elements from the JavaScript objects into React elements. You could create an empty array and then for each, or do like a C style for loop with var I equals 0 and whatnot, and like push new JavaScript or JSX elements to the array.
Nice. Yeah.
So
but
basically,
map is the most common that you'll see.
Because I've written these links, it's going to map. So do I just write links?
Yep.
Wow, there we are.
Sometimes you'll see people do the logic like links data.map directly inside of instead of creating a separate variable. But I personally prefer to do it above the return so that my markup doesn't get as cluttered.
Yeah. I see. Okay, and what would you, I suppose, do you want to spread it sometimes? Or does it not make any difference? Actually,
no.
That breaks it.
Yeah, spreading it as well. Oh, right. Yeah,
no, because I think mapping it is going over each one and
that should
doing
work.
this.
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, but that
creating a new
because
array.
It's already an array, it makes no difference.
Why do you need that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, if we go to the JSON and add another one, that will just render it, will it?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, amazing.
Fingers crossed. Look like a fool if it doesn't.
Okay, away we go.
So I can say this would be like main site.
Whoa!
Nice. Okay, but also I get this warning, and I get worried about warnings. So
well, yeah, someone talking about keys.
Yeah.
Why does React need key prop for lists?
Yes.
And then Gina's asking, key is triggered with map. What does all this mean, Bob?
Yeah, so key is not necessarily just triggered with map. If you noticed when you manually typed your array of anchor elements down in your return, you also got the warning that it needs to have a key prop.
Yeah.
And really what that does is it helps React keep track of where things are, like what order things are being rendered in. And because if you were to have functionality like a drag and drop that allowed you to move them around on the screen, or to like check something off and have it disappear from the DOM, React needs a way to know which one of those things to go in and reorder or delete.
Yes.
And so without going into too much detail, more because I have forgotten the specifics of why it or how it does that under the hood, I feel like every year or so, maybe 18 months, I go in and deep dive on it. So usually what you'll do is you'll just provide a React specific prop called key, and that will help React keep track of where things are and where they should be in the DOM. You can do anything that will be unique. Commonly, you'll see people access the index in the array, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. And React recommends against that too. So if you, for example, knew that your text would always be unique from your elements, you could just say key equals link.text or link.href.
I feel like the href is more likely to be, like you could be sure that you wouldn't have the same one on there twice.
I mean, realistically, yes, but also ideally, you probably want to go for something like if you get this from an API from a database, it's guaranteed to have an ID on it.
Exactly.
Because the database needs to identify this entry somehow.
Yeah, that's the best way. If you're getting it from a real API, just use the ID that comes from the database, because that will be guaranteed to be unique.
Then also, if you want to start updating this entry, then you need to somehow ask an API to say, hey, update this entry. And the only way the API is going to know where you want to update is through this ID as well.
Yep. Yeah, good point.
So ideally, you probably want to just, so there you go. Okay, cool.
And now our error's gone away.
Yeah.
Hassan wants to know, when you're using the map method and you put the second parameter index, how does JavaScript know the second parameter is the real index of that element? Does it know? It
does. Yeah, okay. It does know. The So that's not React specific. That's just JavaScript, which sounds like he knows because he says JavaScript. The callback function that you are providing to map, the only parameter that you're passing to .map is a whole function. And so under the hood, when they wrote array.prototype.map, which means that every array has the map method, they just take your function that you provide them, which is probably called callback in their code or something similar, and they call that callback, and then they pass whatever parameters they want to it. Under the hood, they're probably doing a C-style for loop for you. It's actually fairly trivial to create your own version of .map and .filter and .whatever. Yeah, so they're passing actually 3 parameters to your function. We only care about one, which is the item. But the second parameter will always be the index. So you can, you can access the index. And then the third parameter is the entire array. Like every time this function is called, the third parameter will be the same. It will just be the whole array. Whole thing. Nice. So if you, for example, were to change your, to not use your implicit return so that you could write additional code in here before your return, open up the curly braces, put return parentheses and stuff that inside. And that allows you to, before your return, run some JavaScript. Nice. So you could console log link, console log index, console log whole thing.
Okay, yeah. So every link gets rendered, and then
and notice that it's console logging that 3 times, and that's because your callback function is running for every item that you have in your JSON.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then I would do like a console log with an empty string or something, or just console log so that you get a little white space.
Right.
Oh, that's nice.
Nice.
You could put like those cat emojis, maybe.
Yeah. To separate it all.
So
I
see. Yeah.
How do I drag this console? Whoops.
You can't.
Yeah, you can't make it bigger. But Leanne, if you want to take away the bubble of the comment, it'll make it easier to see the whole console.
Whoops.
Yeah, there you go.
So here's the link that I render individually, ID, href text, index is 0, and then here's the whole JSON that we have. And now link 2, index 1, whole thing once again, ID 3, index 2, and the whole thing once again. Oh, nice.
Let's finish up with a nice question from Nuremi. Hi, Bob. Do I have to be exceptionally great at JS before taking React? Or the fundamentals should do?
Exceptionally great. No.
It's a high bar.
It's so
subjective. It's like, do you have to write your own ES build or something? Is that is exceptionally good?
Yeah, I think my approach is different than what some people might say, because my world has been helping people get jobs. I primarily try to get people to a point where they're job ready, even if it's like kind of barely job ready, because then they can start getting paid to continue learning, and their whole world, their stress levels go down and everything becomes more possible. But you do need to know JavaScript before you start React. I don't recommend people. There are some kind of competitor boot camps, at least here in Utah, and I think around the world, that just like day one, they just say like, we're going to start with React. And I think that's so confusing for a beginner who doesn't understand what's happening with vanilla JavaScript. That yes, I would say you do have to have a solid understanding of JavaScript. I usually recommend, obviously, the Scrimba courses, like the whole front-end career path is designed so that you go through it one step at a time. If you want a good gauge on how ready you are for JavaScript, you can go through this Learn JavaScript for Free course and see how it feels to you. If it's like, oh, that was super easy, then you're probably ready to learn React. There's also Wes Boss's course that's free. It's JavaScript 30. That's a great one that forces you to spend 30 days practicing, your JavaScript skills. I think that's also a good resource that can be like a gauge for people to see how ready they are. And then once you feel comfortable with that, by all means jump into React. But don't go to React if you're like, I don't know what .map. If you didn't know what .map was, then I'd say you probably need to spend more time in JavaScript.
Yeah, because you do have to get a little bit comfortable with your variables, your functions, your array methods, like implicit, explicit returns. Like get stuff from the DOM. It becomes a little bit easier to understand once you know which shortcuts React allows you to make. It makes it a little bit easier to hop on it, rather than when I just got my first job and I had to do React without knowing JavaScript, and it was very hard to tell apart which part was React and which part was JavaScript. And I would Google questions and not really find any answers because I was Googling them. Yeah, I was Googling implicitly how to map in React, when in reality what I want to do is how to do it in JavaScript with React specifics.
Yeah.
And that's obviously, you only know that once you have covered JavaScript to a certain degree.
One question I'd like to finish up on. I said that about the last question, but this really will be the last one because
I'm not in a rush if people have questions, but if you want to keep a standard of an hour, then I'm fine.
And Asad is wondering, aside from the React course in the front-end career path on Scrimba, is there any book or something you would suggest? Which got me thinking, where do you learn React?
Yeah, I learned React probably the same way a lot of other people learn React, which is just to watch a bunch of courses, Google certain things, Google specifics when I have questions, and to build projects. I don't recommend books with React because it's evolving quickly. You are almost guaranteed to have something that's outdated. And so, and the internet's it's the internet. It'll update. You can see the timestamp when it's a YouTube video about React from 2015. It's probably not the resource you want. It's a struggle. When there's a topic that I don't really understand and I'm going to teach it, I have to study the hell out of it because I need to know what I'm about to teach deep enough that I can teach it at an elementary level without just throwing out a bunch of jargon. This is something that I have always focused really heavily on, because I have taken plenty of courses where you can tell the teacher is very knowledgeable, but they don't know how to dumb it down so that it's understandable for a beginner. They maybe forget what it's like to be a beginner, and they don't know how to do some of the basics. And so it's definitely the hardest thing to study something well enough that you can teach it well. That's a trick. And I do it by watching a bunch of courses and scrutinizing every little thing. I'll be like, that guy just did something that I've never seen someone else do. I suspect that's not a common way of doing it, and so I don't want to jump in and teach it that way. But then I'll research it like crazy and ask the community. There's a very vibrant JavaScript community here in Utah, in the USA, that is really good at answering questions. But there's a million of those that are worldwide that you can ask.
Brilliant.
Nice.
Wow. Thank you for joining us, Bob. We did manage to get a React app working.
Yeah, very nice.
Amazing.
We've only touched the surface. We've only done the rendering part of React. We haven't done any state management or side effects or anything that start to really make React shine. routing.
Maybe a future stream.
Yeah. I think our viewers were right saying that our streams would have been much easier if we used React. And I think they're damn right.
Probably there. Yes. If you enjoyed this, please consider giving us the old thumbs up. And you
Yes.
might like to subscribe because on Wednesday, which is Ukrainian Independence Day,
Woohoo!
just slipping that in there, I will be joined by Treasure, another teacher on the career path, and we're talking all things GitHub desktop. So looking
Nice.
forward to that and hope to see you all there.
Yes.
Any closing thoughts, Bob?
No, stay tuned for my upcoming advanced React course, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Announcements will be coming out as soon as it's ready. And you will also find them in the Scrimba Community Digest, which will be landing in people's inboxes tomorrow. So put your email in there if you'd like to grab a copy.
Neat.
Greetings from Indonesia. Greetings to you too, Seth. Any closing thoughts, Michael?
Yeah, enjoy your weekend, everyone.
Yes, I can get behind that. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone, for coming and everyone watching in the future.
Catch you later.
Bye,
Coding.
thanks, everyone.
Whoops.
Oh, no.